Okay, this meeting is being recorded, so everybody has to be on their very, very best behavior. I want to share with you a piece. This is from my good friend, Rabbi Nati Helfgott. Rabbi Helfgott is he's a rabbi in Teaneck, in the shul is called Netivot, I think. I don't know. I think Netivot. But I don't know. He's just a good friend. He's a tremendous Tanakh scholar. He's the chair, I think, of the Tanakh department at Chovevei and other places. So he has this book. It's in Hebrew, but this is called Mikra and Meaning. There's a couple of really just prescient pieces. So this is adapted from that. I have to give proper attribution, proper credit, because, I don't know anything. I just, take what other people say. But, that when you find something good that somebody says, you have to share it. It's worth sharing the Torah. So this Parsha, whereas in many years, Chukat and Balak are together, this year it's separate. And it's a weird Parsha for a couple of reasons. So first of all, if you would think about, there are only a handful of parshios that are named after people, right? So what are they? Noach,
Yitro,
Sarah,
Korach,
Sarah,
and Balak. Chai Sarah I don't count because it's not really about Sarah. It's Chayei Sarah. Okay. So, so sorry, Vivian, no credit. But those are the five. Become Noach, Yisro, Korach, Balak, Pinchas. Now, of those five, only one of them is, I don't.
Noach and Yitro were good.
Well, okay. First of all, Yisro's not Jewish.
He's a
Neither's Noach.
Right? He's a question whether or not he converted. How? When? Okay. Did he convert at that point when the parsha takes place or not? There's no Moshe parsha. There's no Aaron parsha. Pinchas gets a parsha because he, killed a bunch of people, right? And Balak gets a parsha because he cursed a bunch of people. Well, he hired someone to curse a bunch of people. By the way, the parsha is called Balak, not Bilam, even. And as a rabbi for years and years, I've always messed up the two. Then I would say Balak and Balaam. It's hard on the tongue, and so it's interesting. And certainly Korach. These are not, like, in other words, the stories that parshas are named for are not necessarily the most glorious occurrences in the Torah. Okay, be that as it may. But so do we know? Do I need to go over it? Does everybody know the story in a nutshell? If not, there's nothing. We haven't seen it since last year. So the nutshell of the story is that the Jews were in the desert, and Balak, the king of Moab, hires Bilam, who is a sorcerer of some sort, whom we have seen before in history, as we'll see in a little bit. And he hires him to curse the Jewish people. He goes and he tries, and it doesn't work. And his curses three separate times, they turn into blessings. So one of the most famous blessings that he gives is something that we actually start off our davening every single day with. Matovu alech Yaakov mishkanesecha Yisrael, right? How goodly are thy tents, Jacob. So it's that in and of itself is a good question. Why would we start off our daily prayers with something that was recited by one of our enemies? If he's the author of that, why would you start off your prayers with that? Any thoughts on that?
warning.
Warning for what? When you pray in the morning, warning that like enemies are coming?
Warning not to stray.
Because God put the words in his mouth, and even though our enemies are looking to curse us, if we believe in Hashem, that won't happen.
Okay. It's like you guys are like so Pollyannish. I love it. It's like so. Oh, we're so positive, and God loves us. And but there are other things we could pick to start davening. This is davening every day. I'm not talking about talking about like at 6 o'clock in the morning when you're barely awake, right? So what's going on? So there's a sefer on the Parish on Tefillah called the Baruch She'amar, and the Baruch She'amar says, and the way I paraphrase it, because I guarantee you he did not say it this way, Rav Baruch Levi Epstein, was what I call the Little League approach. Okay, now Benish Zeichayet about having to take someone to Little League. For us, it's just ice hockey. Ice hockey all day long, every day is ice hockey. Okay, now if you've ever had to like.
You don't like it.
I love it. No, I love it. But if you've ever had to take kids to sports, okay, so and there's like this unique phenomenon about parents and kids sports, and sometimes parents can get absolutely bananas and nuts, right? It's a known thing. So the parent, when the kid gets up to bat, he's going to say, my kid, he's the best. He's the best hitter on the team. He's the best. He's the best. He's the best. That, right? But if let's say someone else gets up and says it about your kid is the best player on the team. That kid is the best hitter. That kid is the best runner. That kid is the best fielder, right? So whose opinion are you going to take more seriously, right? So by starting off with the prayer of someone that has no reason to praise us and doesn't want to praise us, so that gives it even more efficacy. Because if we talk about it, oh yeah, God is great, Jews are great. Oh yeah, what do you expect them to say, right? So, but when our enemies say it about us, that gives it such more impact. That explains why we would start off our davening. Okay, so he hires him 3 times. He tries, it turns into blessing. The whole thing, and there's this comical scene where he starts beating his donkey, and the donkey talks back to him. The Piha Ason, which is mentioned in the Pirkei Avos, one of the things that was created during the last periods of creation, Bein Hashmashos, before Shabbos, and all of a sudden he's talking to the donkey. He hits the donkey. Donkey falls down. And he's talking about this is the inspiration for Shrek, of course. And the end of the story is they go to Plan B, where they get women from Midian to infiltrate the camp and to seduce the men, and it creates a great plague, which leaves in the beginning of Pinchas next week. Okay, but the most unusual part about this parsha, which is so different than all the other stories that we're reading, particularly in Bamidbar, is that the children of Israel are completely not involved in this. With the exception of the last part of the parsha, which talks about the plague, Moshe has no concept of what's going on. The Jewish people, do they know that there was this major plot against them to destroy them and to get rid of them? They have no idea, right? So, and by the way, and there are probably many times like that where, law enforcement and certain authorities and clandestine services have prevented major attacks, and you only find out about it later on. You're like, oh, geez, that would have been really, really messy. But only after the fact do we find out. So the Jewish people are completely uninvolved. So we have this almost entirely parenthetical parsha placed in the middle of the story of the Jewish people in the desert. Okay, so we don't see that Bnei Yisrael are involved. We don't see any reaction. Moshe doesn't get involved, nothing like this. Okay, so, and it's almost, by the way, so the Rabbi Helfgott says this is almost similar to the beginning of Megillas Esther. The whole plot of Megillas Esther, when it's taking place, the Jewish people have no idea what's going on. They don't know. They don't find out till chapter 3 that Haman wants to establish a decree against them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so we're going to look at now is again, a typical of modern Parshanut, is modern biblical exegesis, if you will, is the comparisons of this parsha to another episode in the Chumash. And that episode will be the episode of Bnei Yisrael in Mitzrayim with Paro, okay? But first, if you look at source number 1, the Gemara in Bava Basra, which just kind of sets the table for us, because the Gemara is asking who wrote all the books of the Bible, by the way, which is a good question. There's an excellent volume by Moshe Sokoloff about the authorship of Tanakh, of who wrote Tanakh. It's not so scholarly that you can't understand it. It's pretty intense. I remember I gave it to Dina once to read, and she gobbled it up, and she's into that sort of thing. That's good. And so we have the question of authorship, especially now with modern theories about who authored the Chumash. Okay, fine. So it says Miksavan Moshe Kosov Sifro Parshas Bilam Ve'Iyov. It says who wrote the books of the Torah. So the Gemara says Moshe wrote his own book, meaning the Torah. And he also wrote the portions of Bilam and the book of Eov. Now, the fact that the Gemara even says it like that, and the portions of Bilam, meaning that this is almost completely extraneous from what the Torah had been doing until now, because again, it's a completely different style. You're going on the story, okay, the Jewish people, they left, and they complained again, and there was an uprising, and then the spies, and then they got punished, and here we are 40 years later, and all of a sudden we have the episode in the Rock, and this generation, and by the way, and then we have to have a succession of leadership. Oh, by the way, let me just sprinkle in a little story in there about something that happened that had nothing to do with the Jewish people per se. It happened around them, and let's include that as part of the canonization of the Chumash. So there has to be a question of why is it even here? Why would the Torah feel it's important? I'm sure maybe there were other people that tried to go rise up and kill him. Why this story? Why is it here? So through using linguistic parallels and similarities in words and phrases, we can maybe figure out, and this is where this is where I leave the exercise to you, is sort of why would these two episodes be similar? So the similarities between this episode and the story of the Jewish people in Mitzrayim with Paro. Okay, so first, if we look at here, sources number 2 and number 3 on the sheets. Okay, so Vayagar Moav mipnei ha'am ma'od ki rav hu vayakatz Moav mipnei bnei Yisrael. And Moab was alarmed because the people were so numerous. Moab dreaded the Israelites. And the Pesukim continue, Vayishlach malachim el Balaam ben Beor, Pesor Ashar Nahar, Eretz b'nei Amo likra lo limor, Hine am yatzam mitzrayim, Hine kisas ein haaretz v'hi yoshem mimuli, V'atolach hana'ar ali as ha'am hazeh ki yatzam hu mimeni, ulai uchal nakabo, v'agar shem min haaretz, ki yadati v'tasher devarech mevarach v'asher ta'ar you are. So they're alarmed because the people were so numerous. So right there, that should be a clue. They were worried that the people were becoming too great in number. That should automatically draw you back to the beginning of Shmos, when it says that the people said to Hine Rav Atsumi Menu Havan Ischak Malo. We're going to see the sources inside. It might be helpful sometimes if you want, if you have the if you want to look at the complete text, but I have the relevant psukim here on the sheets. But just here, and then it says, and he sent messengers to Bilam. You see, even in English they write Balaam, which just drives me nuts. It's Bilam. Bilam, the son of Beor in Petor, which is in the Euphrates, in the land of his kinfolk, divide him, saying, there is a people that came out of Egypt. It hides the earth from view, and it's settled next to. By the way, that's the only specific episode that's mentioned here. They mention Yitzias Mitzrayim, that they come from Egypt. Let's put a curse on them. Since they are too numerous for me, perhaps I can defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that whom you bless is blessed indeed, and whom you curse is cursed. So in the first... this non-Jewish king, and he refers to Bnei Yisrael. If you look here, it says the word Am several times. I think it's 7 times it appears. Bnei Ha'am, I have it in bold, okay? Bnei Ha'am, Bnei Amo, Hine Am, Ha'am, etc., etc. If you look through the Parsha, it's there several times. In Shmos, okay, so if I go further here, Vayomer el amo hine am b'nei Yisrael rav ve'atzum mimenu. Okay, so only in Shmos, and then v'chasher yi'anu also ken yebeh v'chen yifrotz vayakusu mipnei b'nei Yisrael. That this is the first time that b'nei Yisrael are referred to as an am. Who calls them am? It's Paro. Paro is the first one that actually calls them a nation. And if you look at how they look at them, they're Rav Atsumi Menu. They are too numerous, too great for us. Vayakutsu, they dread. If you look back at the other sources, okay, Hine Am Atsumi Menu, okay, Vayakatz Moav. Moav was alarmed. Vayakatz Vayakutsu. Ha'am bipnei b'nei Yisrael. Vayakutsu bipnei b'nei Yisrael in Shemos, and here Vayakatz bipnei b'nei Yisrael. So you see already the similarity of the phrases. Where, in other words, so what's the point of this? As I've said it to you many times, it's worth repeating. Is that when the Torah, if it's one, but if there's several of them, and we're going to see more, but when the Torah does this and creates similarities between episodes, and especially using the same phrases in the Torah, what the Torah is saying is pay attention to this. I want you to notice the similarities and put them together and figure out why we're drawing these two together. There are many ways we could have said this. Why would it be doing this? Now, by the way, this, even though this is what we call modern parshanut and a modern approach, this is by no means modern. Anyone who's ever studied Midrash, if you've ever studied the black hole of Torah, biblical exegesis, which is known as Midrash, because there's a zillion Midrashim, and they're so cryptic, but often the approach is, there's a word here, there's a word here, just like it says, just like it says over there. And that what it's trying to do is, now the problem is they only give you the They give you like the hook to go inside, but it's up to you. And this is the brilliance. And we say Shivim Panim La Torah. This is the beauty of the Torah, because now it's up to us, the learner, the studier, the student, that we can now determine or create or fashion some sort of explanation that would give us a deeper insight into this story, into this episode. Okay, so we have an interesting thing. Now, here's something that's also interesting. If you look at, and this is not something we normally do, and again, it's not necessarily halachic in nature. It's believe it or not, it's actually secular, of how we divide the aliyahs. Okay, so if we look in our parsha, if you have the Chumash present, then start on page 862. Okay. 862 is not just one of those weird made-up area codes for West Orange, right? Remember when 917 first came out, and then the 646, and then there's a great. I remember when 718 came out in the Bronx. Like,
Yeah.
his office always had a 212 until it got 718'd.
Yeah.
There was a great Seinfeld episode where Kramer's dating a girl who's like has a different area code, and he thinks it's like a different, like she's in a different country. Anyway, look at so this is the fourth aliyah. The fourth aliyah, again, this is the whole exchange. We don't have to look through a whole exchange, but I want to look at interesting how the aliyahs end. So on page 866, the fourth aliyah ends, and it ends in pasuk Yud Beis. So it's chapter 23, verse 12. Vayan vayomar halo es asher yasim Hashem b'fi oseh u'shmo ledaber. He said, is it not so that whatever Hashem puts in my mouth, I must take heed to speak? So in other words, he had said something, he was charged to give a curse, he ends up giving a blessing. What happens? And he says, whatever God puts in my mouth, that's what I say. Okay, that's the end of the fourth aliyah. The end of the fifth aliyah, which is on the next page on 868, verse 26. Vayan Bilam vayomer Balak halo dibarti elech lemor kol asher yidaber Hashem oseh aseh. I told you, whatever Hashem said to me, that's what I'm going to do. And guess what's going to be at the end of the sixth aliyah, which is a couple of pages later, page 872 on the top. And he says, it really starts in the baby. He says, if Balak will give me all the gold in the world, he says, I cannot violate what Hashem says to me, good or bad. Asher yidaber Hashem oso adaber. So three successive aliyos are found with how Bilam, the prophet, says, I cannot violate what God says to me. He says, I may have extra supernatural powers. I'm a sorcerer, but I cannot go against what God says to me. Okay. Now, we know, of course, in the story of Shemos, in the story of Paro also employs sorcerers. By the way, who was one of his advisors? As we're going to see, ironically, one of his advisors was Bilam. Bilam, will go into some of his character in a little bit. But if we go back to Parshas Va'era, not to be confused with Va'yera, Va'era, which is in Shemos. So let's look at page 322. Okay. No, I'm sorry. Let's go. Let's go. This is already the plagues. Okay. And by the way, there are more aliyahs like that in Balak as well. I just wanted to point out those three. So if you look at how the fourth aliyah ends, page 330. This is after the plague of frogs. Go ahead, you can sing it. Frogs here, frogs there.
Frogs were jumping everywhere.
Thank you, Gail. And there's an inappropriate line that we added when you have a 5-year-old son who was taught by his older sisters. They always add the line, even in his underwear. So that's how they sing it. Anyway, it's a good thing to add to your Seder this year. Okay, it is, after all, if Elian is going to watch this after Elian, it's almost Pesach. Okay, so he says, Paro calls Moshe and Aaron. He says, get rid of the frogs, and I will send them out, and they could worship. Moshe says to Paro, he says, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take out of it. Vayomer lamachar, vayomer kidvarcha lamante daki'ein k'Hashem kelokeinu. This aliyah ends, and you should just know that there is none like Hashem, our God. Okay, look how the next aliyah ends. The next plague is the plague of, this is actually, we have lice and then we have a rove. This aliyah ends on page 332, verse 18. And I will set apart the land of Goshen, that there should be no swarmness. You know that I am Hashem in the midst of the land. And the next aliyah, the sixth aliyah ends, which is after the plague of hail, of Barad. And you'll note on page 336, verse 16, for this I have let you endure in order to show you my strength so that my name may be declared throughout the world. So you have this where each aliyah is ending, sort of showing and proving to either the Chartumim in Mitzrayim, because remember, they at a certain point could not replicate the plagues that Moshe was causing to happen as a result of God, okay? And here we're showing that Hashem is the all-powerful force. Bilam says as much. He says, whatever God says, I can't deviate. God put it in my mouth. And here Moshe's giving the example saying, God is the all-powerful, but also shows the lack of power, the inability of the Chartumim or these other individuals to overcome. Okay, fine. If we look at source 6 and 7, the next on the page, and look at this, both have an incident where they say, I've done something wrong. So we'll go look at Shemos first, source 6. Vayishlach Paro, vayikra le Moshe Aaron v'yamar lehem chatasi hapam Hashem hatzadik v'ani v'amei reshaim. Now I know it's like crocodile tears because Paro never means it. And that's a whole other question, a whole other share for another time. But Paro calls Moshe and Aaron. He says, "Chatasi hapam, I have sinned this time. God is the tzaddik, and I and my nation, we are evil." Because you hit somebody over the head enough times, they'll say whatever you want, right? And look what happens here. Vayomer Bilam, verse source 7. V'yomer Bilam el malach Hashem chatasi ki lo yadati ki ata nitzav likrasi badarech v'ata imra beinecha shivali. Here Bilam says to the angel of God, he says chatasi. So we have again another similarity. You could chalk it up to the parallels that I have sinned, I have sinned, I have sinned. Okay. Look at how he in source 8 and source 9, and this is really cool because just to show this parallelism. And this is the very beginning of our parasha. Okay, we saw this pasuk already, but it says when he describes the nation that left Egypt, by the way, which he didn't have to say that, you could have just said Bnei Yisrael, but the nation specifically that left Egypt, that's another literary clue. It's a prompt telling you, pay attention to this. This is the nation that left Egypt. But what does it say? Hinachisa es ein haaretz. They have covered the face of the earth. There's so many of them. They're all over the place. Okay. How does it describe the plague of Arbeh? Now, by the way, when you talk about certain things, when you talk about great multitudes, I guess we don't really have it quite up here, but if anybody has family, let's say in Maryland or places like that right now, they're going B'Shugana with their cicadas. Right? It's mamish cicada side. What was it, 17 years or something, right?
Yeah.
Last time, right? First, people have to figure out how to spell it, then they figure out how to pronounce it. That's number one. Then you figure what it's fascinating. Like, where did they go? They die, they come 17 years, how do they know? Okay. But when you talk about something like that, you say, oh, they're all over a place. They use this word swarm. Okay. It was swarming with people. Anybody who, by the way, and I've heard this a lot, that people who are traveling now, they're just, we almost got so used to everything being empty, or traffic is sort of back to normal. If you've had to drive into Manhattan or anywhere to Brooklyn, Long Island and back or something, it's a Michigan trip because everything's back to normal. Everybody wants to get out. The airports are overwhelmed. And, American Airlines had to cancel flights this week because they didn't have enough staff to handle all the people, right? So we talk about a swarms of people. I remember that when I was a kid, they used to make TV movies to terrify you. One of them where they made movies about killer bees. I was terrified of killer bees because I thought for sure, and they had some African strain that came over on a guy's boat in the jar, and it got loose, and and all of a sudden they're attacking people, right? That was like my childhood of TV movies, okay? And when you look back at them, you're like, ugh, those are terrible. So look at it describes Arbeh. Arbeh is locusts. And has anyone ever seen a locust infestation? It is scary, by the way. It is. I was in Israel once and I saw a locust infestation coming from Egypt. I was in a lot and they were coming over from Egypt. It was really frightening. The chisa es ein haaretz. Look at that. Exact same phrase. Talking about Arbeh and talks about in other words, so as if when Balak describes to Bilam about the infestation of the Jewish people, and it's, by the way, less than human, comparing them to a swarm of locusts. Now, why is it important that he uses this phrase? If you look at the next source, in source number 10, a fascinating Gemara in Sota. The Gemara says, Amar Rab Chiya bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Simai, Shlosha hayu ba'osaitza Bilam ve'Eov ve'Yisro. Now that's not the whole Gemara, but I'm going to tell you the whole Gemara because this is what you get. You get bonus material here. And so the Gemara says that when Paro wants to figure out what to do with the original Jewish problem and looking for his solution to this Jewish problem, they're so great and they're going to rise up against us. We have to do something about it. So there were three people who gave him advice. One was Bilam, one was Eov, one was Yisro. And when he came up with the idea, Bilam said, go ahead, kill the Jewish people. Eov remained silent, and Yisro protested, and he fled. So the Gemara says that Bilam, because he went along with it, he met the end that he met, which we learn in our parsha actually later on. Eov, who was silent, it says that he was silent that he was punished his whole life. He lived a whole life of suffering. And Yisro, of course, was rewarded with the son-in-law of Moshe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he has a parsha named after him. By the way, Eov, now we have a further connection. It said the Gemara, the first brisa, Moshe wrote the Torah, and he wrote Bilam, and he wrote Eov. Okay, now, so we see, and to thicken the plot a little bit, this is something we've mentioned in the past, is that where is it that, and we could tie together a bunch of things here, which is really fascinating. Remember, Moshe grows up in Egypt. He goes out, he sees his brethren suffering, and what does he do? He gets involved. He kills an Egyptian. The next day, his favorite two guys, Dasan and Aviram, who we saw in Parshas Korach, making trouble before they hit their, low, meaning they got swallowed up in the earth. And they said to Moshe, what, you're going to judge over us like you killed the Mitzri? Acheino dahadavar, he goes to judgment. Moshe, they want to kill him for going against the family business. And what does he do? He runs away. Now, the Torah would have us believe that he runs away right away to Midian. He goes to Midian. He goes to the well. He meets, what does he meet at the well? Right? Zephra. We have to refer to her appropriately. Zephra, her name was, in the 1956 Cecil B. DeMille Classic, where Dathan was played by, again, yes, Edward G. Robinson, who makes an appearance every week here in the Shiur. So, and he goes back. So how old do you think he is at that point when he goes to Midian? Like say he flees Egypt. How old is he?
30-ish.
30-ish. Anybody else? What do you think? And we don't know. We have to figure it out. Most Mefarshim put him sort of in his early to late teens. Okay. When does he return to Egypt? And this we know for sure. He returns to Egypt when he's just about 80 years old. What in the world is he doing for 60 years? Is he working for the Shver for 60 years? Watching the flocks? So this is a source of great discussion, perhaps even controversy. As I mentioned before, the deep, dark hole of Medrash, there's a Medrash. It's like an 8-page mini volume, something called Toldos Moshe Rabbeinu. I think that's what it's called. I actually have a copy of it. It's not hard to find. And it chronicles the exact back and forth goings of Moshe Rabbeinu. And there is an opinion in that source, which, by the way, the Eben Ezra and other Rishonim quote it, some support it, and some say it's completely fallacious. That's for them to decide. But they say that when he fled Egypt, he did not first go to Midian, which is probably, for all intents and purposes, east towards Saudi Arabia, that direction, as opposed to if he's already in Egypt, they say that he went south and west, he went towards Ethiopia. And what is Ethiopia called in Hebrew? Cush. This is going to be important.
Oh, that comes up later, his wife.
Shelley's paying attention, right? Because in Parshas Baloscha, Miriam and Aaron, they get into trouble. Miriam more so because she talks about Isha Kushis Asher Lakach. He took a Kushite wife. What Kushite wife? Tzipporah is from Midian. What Kushite? What's made Kushite? So we have the Mefarshim bend over backwards to explain that as a Kush is so Kush, that's how Miriam was so, how Yocheved was so, Tzipporah was so many women. Tzipporah was so Tzipporish, right? In other words, the Kush means that she was black. As black as she was black, that's how beautiful she was beautiful. Now, it's not exactly compelling because if you want to say somebody's beautiful, you say, you're so beautiful. You don't say, as black as that person is black, that's how beautiful you're beautiful. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it just goes to show you that the Mefarshim are struggling to figure out the simple pshat of the pasuk. If you follow this medrash, it actually fits in quite well. Because what's the story? That Moshe Rabbeinu goes to Cush. He goes to Ethiopia. And Moshe is just trying to run away. But of course, Moshe cannot escape the heroics of his own life. He can't look away when someone's in trouble. And the people in Cush were in trouble. And they were being besieged by an evil king. And Moshe defeats the evil king, and they make him their king. And you can't be a king if you don't have a queen. So it says that they gave him a queen, an Isha Kushit, a Kushite wife. The Medrash also goes very clearly to point out that he never lived with her as husband and wife. He was never intimate with her because he knew that this is not someone he's supposed to be with. But he remained there for 40 years, which explains kind of this big gap. And then after 40 years, he leaves. Oh, by the way, who is the king that Moshe defeated, helped them defeat? None other than Bilam. Bilam is the king. So now Bilam has it in for Moshe Rabbeinu. He had it in for the Jewish people. And now that
Wait, can I ask you a question? So if
Sure.
she's
Let me
the
just
black
finish
woman,
the thought.
oh, go ahead.
Finish the thought for 1 second. That he's done in by Moshe a second time, and now he realizes here's my chance to get revenge, not only on the Jewish people but on Moshe particularly, which is why Moshe is not even aware of this. He's not even involved in the story, and he still gets defeated. And that's why when he's talking about the Jewish people, he's almost like expressing his own hurt at what happened to his plan in Egypt, and now it's all coming full circle. It's interesting. Yes, Gail. Sorry.
So if the Cushite woman is someone that he's not lived with as husband and wife, but was with at least the 40 years, why would Miriam be referring to her?
Well, we don't know what she said. We just know that, they spoke about this Cushite woman. And again, there, no matter which approach you take, and by the way, and that's a shiur for another time, which we can go back to when we get to Baloscha again, if you so desire. But whatever theory you take, there's going to be holes in it. They call them plot holes. Kids are great at discovering plot holes in like long series and movies and things like that. Although we say there's a great saying in Yiddish, right? Oh, but for Nakasha Starminute, right? We said it before, like nobody dodged from question. Okay, all right. But yeah, we don't know what they were saying, but they were talking about it. Okay. Now we know what prompted the conversation is that, according to Rashi, that when the two people were giving prophecy, and they said, "Oh my God, they're gonna give prophecy." So Tzipporah says to her sister, they're having tea. Her sister-in-law is just like a Val. I hope at least they could be with their wives again, because once Moshe got prophecy, he never touched me ever again. You know how that conversation goes. Okay, fine. Well, actually, I don't know, so don't share with me. Okay, let's continue. So that's this. Now, an interesting comparison that we have further. Source says 11 through 15, and he says each time that he gives the prophecy, he says Vayisa Mishalo Vayomar. He gives his language, and he goes on. Min Aram Yanchini Balak Melech Moav Mahare Kedem Lecha Arali Yaakov Lecha Zoma Yisrael. Mi Mana Afar Yaakov Esrova Yisrael. Matov Lecha Yaakov Mishkanosecha Yisrael. 7 different times, Bilam uses the combination of Yaakov and Yisrael. These are just 3 of the examples: Yaakov and Yisrael, Yisrael and Yaakov, Yaakov and Yisrael. Okay, now. With the exception of when it actually Yaakov's name is changed to Yisrael, okay, the only 2 times that the combination of Yaakov and Yisrael are used in the same pasuk, again, without the actual name change, when Yaakov's name was changed to Yisrael, the only other 2 times it appears is, you're not going to guess where. Here we go, in referring to the Jewish people going to Egypt. First is in Parshas Vayigash, my favorite parsha in the whole world. You can guess why. Ve'ele shmos b'nei Yisrael habayim mitzrayim Yaakov uvanav, and these are it's my bar mitzvah parsha. These are the names of the children of Israel, Yaakov uvanav, and then here in Shemos, uMoshe Allah El HaElohim ve'ikra lav Hashem min ahar leimor kosam alaveis Yaakov v'sagei livnei Yisrael. So in other words, the two times other than when the name was actually changed, and other when the 7 times that are mentioned here, what happens? The Jewish people in the context of the Exodus, one is the very beginning as they're heading down to Egypt, and one is sort of the exclamation point at the end of the Exodus, because this is right by Matan Torah, after they finally, when is it? Yaakov and Yisrael. Okay, so I think it's fair to say, once we make this connection, that there's a lot of the Torah, the text is drawing you to make a similarity between the episode of the Jewish people in Egypt and this episode of Bilam trying to curse the Jews. Okay, so now I leave it to you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, ladies and ladies of the jury. What is the connection? Where do we go from here? There are no bad ideas. So let's think out loud. Let's try to figure out maybe, and just keep in mind that this is now year 40 in the desert. Okay? So think of it. So in other words, this is year 40. They're about to leave the desert to go into the land of Israel. And that took place comparing us to the Exodus. So what do you think? Not everybody at once. There are no bad answers. I know Gail's thinking of something. She's going to say something. I feel it.
I'm going to say something. I don't think it has anything to do with it, but that,
But at least
when you clean house, I think Hashem had a clean house for who wasn't allowed to go into Israel. And so created this, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the first part of it, but the second part is to kind of square up who was going in and who wasn't going in.
Oh, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. What Gail is really saying is that each episode talks about a nation that is on the verge of leaving where they are, going to a new reality.
It's an elevation when you change the name from Yaakov to Yisrael. It's spiritual.
And that's just part of the change. In other words, they went from slaves to free people, Egypt to post-Egypt, which is known as the Exodus. And here they're going from Midbar to, they are free people, but they're going to their new identity of Bnei Israel in Israel. So what you might, as Rabbi Hafkat calls it, a mini Exodus. It's also a bit of an Exodus, if you think about it, Exodus from the desert going into the land of Israel. And by the way, and this, I don't think he references it in the article, but it's quite obvious because he doesn't have to say it because it's quite obvious. But what happens when the Jewish people go into the land of Israel? What does Joshua
to work?
No. But before to actually go into the land of Israel, what does Joshua do?
The Jericho wall.
Yes, before that.
He sends the spies out.
When they have to, no, yeah.
And
But when they actually go in, what happens to the Jordan River? He splits it.
Yeah.
He splits the sea and they have to walk through. So it's almost like a recreation of what happened 40 years ago. He causes the water to stop and it like piles up, and by the Gemara discusses what happened to all the water. Is like piling up high? Is it just stopping? But again, a body of water splits and the Jewish people go through. By the way, they go through in the month of Nisan. They go through in the month of Nisan as well. It's the 10th day of Nisan that they go through, which is the day that Miriam, by the way, died. It's the original day of Shabbos HaGadol. Okay. That's when they go in. By the way, that's based on that. That's how we figure out exactly when Moshe Rabbeinu died, because it says they mourned for 30 days and then they waited 3 days to go over. So that brings us back 30 days, and then brings us back to the 7th of Adar. Adar Elul, Zion Adar. 1 month is Zion Nisan, and then 3 days, that brings us to the 10th of Nisan. Anyway, so look at this Sfas Emes. I copied for you this Sfas Emes. Really nice passage here, and we could read it in English. You want to read it in Hebrew, have fun. The language of the verse is Ha'am Hayotzei Mitzrayim. For Bilam was one of the advisors to Paro to enslave the nation of Israel, and now too, through his magic and sorcery, he wanted to return them to Egypt. So before they can sort of go through the second mini Exodus, there's someone that wants to prevent it from happening. Who is it? It's Bilam. Bilam, he says, he refers to them specifically, the miracle, the Hayotzei Mitzrayim, those who have left Egypt. What does he want to do? He wants to bring them back or prevent them from going to the next stage of their development. Okay? That's why the text says Hayotzei, coming out in the present, for their exodus was not yet complete. Because if I ask you, when does Pesach end? So the traditional answer is at the splitting of the sea. The more sophisticated answer is at Har Sinai when they received the Torah. That's why when does Pesach end? Ends on Shavuos. But in actuality, when does it really end? It ends when they can go into the land of Israel. By the way, you notice we don't have a holiday for that? You ever wonder about that? Why we have a holiday for leaving? We have a holiday for getting the Torah. Why don't we have a holiday for going into Israel? Like when probably because of subsequent exile, probably because we don't deserve it, and probably because my theory is, and I'm a big fan of Moshe Rabbeinu, and I think that he kind of gets the short end of the stick in some ways, but probably because Moshe doesn't get to go in. So like it wouldn't be right for us to create a celebration of a day that the greatest Jew of all time, number one, first ballot Hall of Famer, couldn't go into Israel. It would be kind of like a real pachin ponim. It would be like in French, they call it a shtoch. It's not really French, it's Yiddish, but they call it a shtoch. We're like, it's not right. It's not right. We're like, how can you celebrate the fact that he didn't go in? Okay. Anyway, so the Sfas Emes continues. So that's why it says Yotzei, the Exodus was not yet complete. And I found in the Zohar, which is not unusual for the Sfas Emes to get a Rebbe to quote the Zohar, that Bilam wanted to return them to Egypt. And therefore, in each of the blessings, Bilam mentions God who took them out of Egypt. For he saw that he couldn't weaken the freedom that God had granted us when we left Egypt. And therefore, the rabbis wanted to establish the section of Bilam as part of the recitation of Shema. That's the Gemara suggests that, and maybe we should put that in Shema. Forget about the beginning of davening, but the beginning of Shema. That's how important this is. And thus it's written, my people remember, please, Zechorna, what Balak, the king of Moab, planned to do, and what Bilam, the son of Beor, answered him. That's a pasuk in Micha. It reads much better in the Hebrew. Just as there's a mitzvah to remember and mention the Exodus every day, you also have to remember the kindness that Hashem did for us in thwarting the plot of Bilam the wicked. You have to remember that there is what God did for us and what could have happened to us. So bringing that all full circle, this, again, we are basically at the end of the Chumash right now, right? Moshe was punished last week. Aaron died. Miriam died. What's left? We have to appoint a successor, which is next week's parsha, Pinchas. Then they have a couple of extra. There's really not much more narrative that appears after Pinchas. You have Matos Masei. It recounts how many journeys they made, the 42 journeys. By the way, they say that that there's 42 lines in every column of the Sefer Torah. There have to be 42 lines. It corresponds to the journeys of Bnei Israel in the Midbar. It's an interesting factoid. But I'm just going to put everybody back on the screen here so I can see everybody. Yay! And the couple of laws about when you go in and you have to divide up the land this way and that way. It talks about the borders of Eretz Yisrael. And then the book of Devarim has no narrative. The book of Devarim is all Moshe Rabbeinu's really, really, really long speech, which he started. The Torah tells us specifically in Devarim on the first day of Shvat in the last year. So it's Shvat Adar 7. A speech lasting a month and 7 days. Don't everybody complain if I give a long speech. That was a long speech, okay? And then he dies, and that's it. And then the last bit of narrative in the Chumash is Moshe Rabbeinu dying. So so in other words, the Chumash ends now. They're ready to go in. We have to tie up a couple of loose ends, and that's why this is so important. This story. So why is this parenthetical story put here? Because here, look, it's Moshe Rabbeinu on the outskirts. He's not involved in this mini exodus. It's gone. God now taking the mini exodus of this next generation, bringing them into the land as they have to begin their new lives post Moshe, post Man, post Be'er, post Anana, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They have to, as Gail said, they have to actually work now, right? Which could be one of the reasons why the spies gave a negative report, is that they had it too good. They didn't want to change. Some people don't want to change. Some people don't like leaving home. Some people don't like growing up. Some people don't like going out into the world. Hard to relate to, right? Yeah. Like, we want to, like, no, Arois, gay, get out of here already, like, go make your own life. But it's a very difficult transition. And so this is really about the second transition. Whereas we saw how difficult the transition was going from slavery to freedom, this might be perhaps even a more difficult transition, and it's only brought to the fore because we see that the forces that were trying to prevent it from happening, unbeknownst to the Jewish people, that they're even going through this. And that's why it's so important that it's inserted here, right smack in the middle of the narrative of what the Jewish people are doing. We have another narrative which has nothing to do with the Jewish people's activities, so to speak, because they're completely passive in this affair, but yet they are the central and focal point of this, and they don't even know that it happens. And that's the beauty of the Chumash. And that's why I think Sefer Bamidbar is the most fascinating book of all the books in the Chumash. There's so much that happens, so much. And as we saw last week, that somewhere in the middle, we skipped 38 years, but here we are in year 40, and look what happens. So this parsha, even though it's a nice story, there's a lot to it. And that's why when we pay attention to the text, and we say, oh, Matovo Alecha Yaakov Mishkan Asechi, so Yaakov Yisrael, what's happening? So much is happening. So I'm forever indebted to my friend Ray Helfgott for pointing this out. It's really I have a bunch of really fascinating essays in the book, if you want some good summer reading. But that's where we stand. So I'll let people know. I don't know what's happening in the next couple of weeks because I have kids leaving, buses. I'm not sure. I go where I'm told. You know what I'm saying? But I will. It's good to see everybody, and I'll send out the recording very, very shortly. Everybody should have a wonderful, wonderful day and stay dry.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
Bye.
you.